ISA stands for Individual Savings Account. Now, while all the different types at this stage might seem a little bit confusing, there's one thing that all ISAs share in common, and that is the fact that they are tax wrappers. A simple way to understand tax wrappers is to compare investing to farming. Bear with me here. If we replace cash for crops, then a farmer plants their seeds, tends to their crops over months if not years, in the hope that at the end of that process, when they come to harvest, the fruit will sustain them. With investing, an individual will look after a pot of money over months, if not years again, and at the end of that process hope that that pot has grown significantly enough to support them in whatever goals they have at that point in their life. But what has all of this got to do with tax wrappers? For that, I'm going to introduce you to Tom.
This is Tom, and Tom's a farmer. In his first year of farming, Tom did everything right. He planted his crops, tended to them, and waited patiently for harvest. So you can imagine Tom's disappointment that when it came to harvest, he realised the taxman had taken a bite out of all of his crops. But Tom's no fool, so the next year he built a fence, but not without technical difficulties. He finally got his fence up and running. Now his crops are protected, and the only person that takes a bite out of them is Tom.
Thanks, Tom. The tax wrapper of an ISA is like the fence around Tom's farm. It means that no matter how big your investments get, the taxman will not be able to tax them further. So if you come to draw income or you sell those investments at any point, you will not pay a penny in tax on those funds that you receive. So you can understand how powerful the tax wrapper is. I thought it'd be good to have a quick look at an investment portfolio that isn't protected by an ISA and how that would be taxed. On the screen now are the current tax-free allowances for any cash position that you would hold. So, as a basic rate taxpayer, you're entitled to receive £1,000 of interest per year from cash, tax-free. Anything above that will be taxed at your normal tax rate. This is 20%. So for every £100 in interest that you receive above £1,000, you will lose £20 of it to the taxman. As a higher rate taxpayer, you get a £500 allowance, and then you're taxed at 40%. So for every £100 you receive above the £500, you lose £40 of it to the government. An additional tax rate payer, you're entitled to no tax-free allowance on interest, and you will be taxed a massive 45% of anything that you receive from cash. So if you receive £100 in interest, you get taxed £45 of it. Next is shares, and this is where it gets quite interesting. There's two types of taxes that can be applied to shares. So first of all, capital gains. This is tax on any profit that you receive when you sell an investment. And then there's also dividend tax. This is the type of income that you receive from shares. With capital gains tax, every individual in the UK gets £12,300 per year tax-free allowance on capital gains, and then lower rate taxpayers will pay a tax of 10% on any funds that are subject to capital gains above the £12,300, and higher rate taxpayers will pay 20%. With dividends, you're entitled to £2,000 a year tax-free dividends, and then the tax rate on anything above that £2,000 ranges from 7.5% all the way up to a massive 38.1%. Look, I know what you're thinking, but Damien, I'm never going to be in a position where I'm earning £2,000 a year dividends, or that capital gains tax ever even applies to me. Okay, I hear you, but let me show you how a small, consistent investment over a long enough period of time can produce some amazing results, and will definitely leave you exposed to these types of taxes. Let's say you invested £100 a month into a FTSE 100 tracker, provided an average rate of return of 9%, you adjusted the contribution for inflation, so it went up by 2% each year, so £100 the first year, £102 the next year, and you did that for 30 years. You would have contributed just under £49,000, but the value of that pot would be over £222,000 in total. Let's say you wanted to sell that pot so that you could retire to the south of France. You've made over £173,000 in profit. Now, while you get £12,300 worth of tax-free capital gains allowance, the best case is that you're going to be taxed around £16,000 on those funds, but more than likely it's going to be in the region of £32,000. If you had that protected in an ISA, you sell those funds, you don't pay any tax at all. Let's say you're not the kind of person who sells, and what you want to do is live off the income instead. We can assume that a dividend rate of around 4%, so whatever the value of your pot is, you will receive about 4% per year in dividends. That'd be around about £8,881 in dividends each and every year. You get £2,000 worth of dividends tax-free each year, which means you have a taxable position of around £6,800. The best case scenario is, of that £6,800, a lower rate taxpayer would pay around £488 in tax. The worst case is that a higher rate taxpayer would pay about £2,620 £21 in tax every single year on that dividend income. And that's just an example on £100 a month. Imagine if you'd save 500. Tax is likely to have the biggest negative impact on the overall amount of funds that you have at the end of the investment process. And for the simple task of opening an ISA, which takes minutes, it's probably the easiest money you'll ever earn, or at least save yourself. The first type of ISA we're going to look at is the cash ISA. As the name suggests, this ISA is specifically for holding cash. You need to be 16 or over to use one of these ISAs. And the tax benefit that it provides is that you will not pay any tax on any interest that you receive on the cash that's deposited within the ISA. And while there are 4 to 5 different types of cash ISA, all you need to know here really is that typically the longer you lock away the funds within the ISA, the higher the interest rate that you receive. The ability to withdraw money from a cash ISA ranges from an instant access ISA when you can take out money whenever you like, all the way up to a fixed term ISA where you could lock away money for up to 5, 10 years even. The decision you need to make as an investor is, with this money that I'm going to put into my cash ISA, will I need to have instant access to it? If not, how long a timeline am I looking to lock away these funds for? Typically, the longer the time rate that you lock away the money for, the higher the interest rate you receive. This isn't always the case though, so please take a look around. Now, while I'm not going to cover each individual specific type of cash ISA in this video, I've put a link in the description to a Which article which breaks down each particular type in more detail, so just click on that and have a look. While cash ISAs typically provide a higher interest rate than a normal bank account, interest rates are so low across the board at the minute, I don't really see cash ISAs as a means of building long-term wealth. Personally, I would use a cash ISA to store any funds I needed in the short to medium term. The restrictions on removing money from an ISA though are great for people who struggle to save. If you're the type of person that dips into your savings on a regular basis to cover non-essential costs, then a cash ISA can lock away the money for as short as say 30 days. Stopping you from spending that money on things you don't need. If you're interested in opening this type of ISA, start by speaking with your bank, but shop around as the interest rates vary from provider to provider. Also, the requirements on when you can take your money out and how much you need to contribute each month in order to qualify for the interest rate varies from provider to provider also. I used a comparison website. I'll put a link in the description below next to the Which article that breaks down each type of cash ISA into more detail for you. You can use any comparison site. This was just the one I used. The second type of ISA we're going to look at is a stocks and shares ISA. And I'm not going to lie to you, I love my stocks and shares ISA. To me, they're the perfect combination of tax-wrapped efficiency on investment, while also providing you flexibility and choice around when and how you access your funds. Tax wrapper incentive that they provide is that you pay no tax on any income that you receive in the form of dividends, and if you sell shares, you pay no capital gains tax. In terms of the headlines, the maximum contribution per year is £20,000. You need to be 18 or over in order to have a stocks and shares ISA. You can only contribute to one type of stocks and shares ISA each year with one provider. And although the name suggests that these are just for shares, you can actually hold a few different types of investments within this type of ISA, including stocks, shares, ETFs, funds, unit trusts, government bonds, and corporate bonds. The reason a stocks and shares ISA is so good for building wealth is that the stock market traditionally has provided a higher return than having your cash in a bank account. As I said before, the average rate of return on the FTSE 100 is around 9%. So that means the compounding effect on your funds within an ISA of this type is significantly higher than it would be if you were to store it in cash. If I was to give you one piece of advice to take away from the video today, it would be to go away and seriously consider opening a stocks and shares ISA and making even just small contributions to it on a monthly basis, whatever you can afford. It's important to stop and remember here that a higher rate of return often means a higher rate of risk. When buying any form of stocks or shares, your funds are at risk. And while investing for the long term can mitigate some of that risk and smooth out the ups and downs of the market, it's important that you don't go into this assuming that the returns are guaranteed. And even though the FTSE's averaged a 9% return over the last 80 years, there's nothing to say that it will do that going forwards. In order to mitigate the risk, I invest in my stocks and shares ISA for the long run. I'm talking 10, 15, 20-year timelines. As an example, if I bought shares in February and needed to sell them now, I would have lost a lot of money. Do your research and only commit money that you're prepared to lose, and invest for the long term. Just like the cash ISA, most banks provide their own versions of stocks and shares ISAs, but I would also consider other specialist providers such as Hargreaves Lansdown, Vanguard, Fidelity, AJ Bell, and even platforms like Free Trade. The key thing when shopping around for a stocks and shares ISA is to make sure that the management fees you're paying are low, if not non-existent. Personally, I use Vanguard. I have used Hargreaves Lansdown in the past. Both are good providers. I've just decided to go with Vanguard now as the management fees are slightly less than the Hargreaves Lansdown ones. To give you an example, I think the overall cost of the management of my stocks and shares ISA through Vanguard is less than 0.5% of the total value of the pot each year. Before we move on to the last two types of ISAs, there's one more concept that I need to explain that affects them all, and that is the contribution limits across the different ISA types. The best way to do that is through a combination of Mathlink cubes and my dodgy handwriting. Here are 20 Mathlinks cubes, each representing £1,000, and together they represent the total amount that you can contribute to UK ISAs in the tax year of 2020. So if, for 2020, we have an innovative finance ISA, a lifetime ISA, a stocks and shares ISA, and a cash ISA. Now the first one to pay attention to is the lifetime ISA. That has a maximum contribution limit of £4,000 per year. If you contribute more than that, you will not get the tax benefit on top of it, so you would never put more than that in. The rest of the funds, you can contribute to the other three ISAs as you see fit. So you might want to put £5,000 into an innovative finance ISA, £5,000 into a cash ISA, and £6,000 into a stocks and shares ISA. But you don't have to contribute to all different types each year. You can contribute them to however you like. If you wanted to, you could put all £20,000 into a stocks and shares ISA. Or you could just contribute £1,000 to a stocks and shares ISA in 1 year. The £20,000 is a limit, it's not a target. The other thing that we need to understand when it comes to ISAs is the rules around making contributions to two of the same type of ISA within the same tax year. So hypothetically, let's say in 2019 we had a cash ISA and we put £1,000 into it. But the next year in 2020, we didn't like the provider of the cash ISA in 2019, so we wanted to open a new one. We opened a new one with another provider, we put £1,000 in that. That is perfectly fine. But what you couldn't do is contribute to two cash ISAs within the same financial year. This doesn't just apply to cash ISAs, it'd be the same for stocks and shares ISAs. You can't contribute to two stocks and shares ISAs with different providers in the same financial year and still receive the benefit. This applies to all types of ISAs. So key things to remember, you can only contribute to one type of each ISA within a financial year with one provider. And the limit of £20,000 total for the current tax year can be spread across the ISAs however you see fit, but the lifetime ISA has a maximum contribution of £4,000 within one financial year. Simple. So the third type of ISA we're going to look at is a lifetime ISA, commonly referred to as a LISA. Definitely should have called it a LISA. This type of ISA was introduced by the government to encourage young people to save for their retirement. For that reason, it has some unique rules around it that differentiate it from the other types of ISAs. So first of all, let's cover the headlines. You need to be over 18 in order to use this, but you also have to be under the age of 40. So the age range to use this ISA is 18 to 39. You also can't pay into it past the age of 50. It has a maximum contribution limit of £4,000 a year. So you can't put more than £4,000 a year into this ISA, but the government will top up whatever you put in up to that limit by 25%. So essentially, if you put £4,000 in, the government will top it up by an extra £1,000. You don't have to contribute the maximum £4,000. If you only put £1,000 in, you would get a £250 top up. The money that sits within the ISA, you can use it however you like, either cash or you can invest in stocks and shares, but you can't access the funds until you're 60, apart from in two other circumstances. The first, if you're buying your first home, and the second, if you've unfortunately been diagnosed terminally ill with less than 12 months to live. If you withdraw funds from your LISA, for any reason than the ones mentioned, you will pay a withdrawal fee, which currently sits at 20%. So basically, if you take £1,000 out, they'll take 200 off it. But from the 6th of April 2021, that withdrawal penalty will go up to 25%. There are rules around the benefit towards buying a house, and they are as follows. The lifetime ISA has to have been open for at least 12 months. The property has to cost less than £450,000. You have to use a solicitor in order to purchase the property, as the funds will be paid directly to them. And you have to be buying the property with a mortgage. You can't be a cash buyer. The LISA actually replaced the now defunct Help to Buy ISA. So some of the people watching this video may have a Help to Buy ISA set up and still be using it. But a lot of banks are now offering the ability to transfer into a LISA free of charge and roll that benefit over. One of the reasons you might consider doing this is if your circumstances change and you decide not to buy a house, you still get the benefit of the top up. If you're planning to buy a house and you think that it's going to take you longer than 12 months to save, the lifetime ISA is fantastic, as essentially you get free money off the government to help you with the purchase. So let's say you save for a house for 2 years and put in the maximum £4,000 each year. When you come to buy that property, essentially the government will give you £2,000 towards the purchase price, meaning that the £8,000 that you contributed is made to £10,000 by the government. Not bad. If you didn't want to buy a house and you opened a LISA at the age of 18, contributing the maximum amount each year of £4,000 so that you're entitled to the full £1,000 bonus from the government, and you contributed up until the age of 50, the government would essentially give you a free £32,000. Nice one, Lisa. Some of you may be sitting there thinking, well, the lifetime ISA is a better option than the stocks and shares ISA, and there is an argument to say that it is. But the lack of flexibility on when you can pull the funds out and the contribution limit are clear negatives when it comes to lifetime ISA. The way I treat my lifetime ISA is like a pension. There's a lot of debate on whether a lifetime ISA is a better option than a private pension. In the description below, there's an amazing article that breaks down the differences and which provides the best overall benefit dependent on circumstances. But in summary, while private pensions provide a tax rebate, of up to 40% on any funds that you put in, when you come to draw from a private pension, the money that you take out of it is taxed at your current tax rate, which could be anywhere from 20 to 45%. With a lifetime ISA, not only do you get the 25% top up, but the funds, when you draw them at the age of 60 or over, are completely tax-free. Now, you can draw from a private pension at the age of 55, whereas a lifetime ISA, you can't draw from it until the age of 60. As I don't put more than £4,000 a year into a private pension, I use a lifetime ISA. I am a higher rate taxpayer, so I do pay 40%. And if I was to put that into a private pension, I would be able to claim back 40% tax on those funds. So the 25% that I get from the government from the lifetime ISA is 15% less than the benefit that I would from a pension. But the ability to draw the money tax-free at the end, in my opinion, outweighs that 15%. As ultimately, the best case scenario when I draw that private pension is that I'm going to pay 20% tax on those funds. If I'm a higher rate taxpayer still, I'll be paying 40% in tax. Final type of ISA we're going to look at today is the Innovative Finance ISA. I'm going to refer to it as an IFA because I struggle to say innovative. Innovative. Very similar to the stocks and shares ISA in the sense that you have to be over 18 to have one. There's a maximum contribution of £20,000 a year, which is split across the other ISAs I explained before. It provides instant access so you can take your money out whenever you like. But the difference here is it's specifically for investing within peer-to-peer lending. It provides a tax wrapper to the investments within it. So that means any gains on those investments are not taxed at any point. Peer-to-peer lending arose out of the financial crisis. And as the name suggests, is a form of lending whereby an individual, i.e. you, lends to another individual or business, replacing the need for a bank in that relationship. Some of the biggest peer-to-peer lending platforms in the UK include Zupa, RateSetter and Funding Circle. Qualifying investments that you can hold within this type of ISA include peer-to-peer lending, crowdfunding debentures and cash. Peer-to-peer lending is a relatively new industry when you consider stocks and shares have existed for over 100 years. For that reason, track record of returns are unproven, which might imply more risk. Some of the advertised rates from peer-to-peer lending are higher than other types of investment vehicle. Please do your research and make sure you know what you're getting into. Ultimately, when investing in peer-to-peer lending, you are lending money to another individual. There is an argument to suggest that those individuals seek out peer-to-peer lending platforms where they pay a higher rate of interest because they're unable to borrow from banks. There's probably a good reason that they can't borrow from banks. To summarise the whole video, investing without using an ISA is like swimming in cold water without a bathing suit. It's all good while you're in the water, but when it comes time to get out, those assets that you're normally so proud of are looking a little bit smaller than you thought. Thanks for watching, I'm Damien and I'll see you next week.